Welcome back to another wonderful Saturday episode of the Maximum Lawyer Podcast. As always, I'm Tyson Mutrix. I'm back for another Saturday episode, which is great. This is a little bit of a different mix because we had skipped a week because of the holidays, and so I'm basically making up a week so we can give you all as much value as possible. And I think this one's going to be a really good one. I'm going to be talking about Kolbe because we had some people from Kolbe come in and do a training with the firm, and I guess she probably considered a consultant, I guess is what you would consider her, but she was fantastic. It was really, really good, a really good training. So I want to talk about some of the things that I learned, some of my takeaways, some bitter pills to swallow, I guess is another way of putting it, but really excited. So the team, if you've noticed, if you're watching on YouTube, the background is a little bit different. It's funny. Yesterday, my team said, well, you're not coming in tomorrow. And I said, what? They're like, well, you're taking off. I said, well, I've actually got some recordings I got to do. Like, well, you can do things for Max Law if you want, but you're not working. So either I was telling people in Circle today, because we had our Friday 11:30 call and in the association, and I was talking about it, and I said either I did something really, really right or really, really wrong. I think I was more on the right side. They just wanted to give me a day off, which was kind of cool. And so I just said, you know what? I'm not going to go in the office. I'll just record from home. Where I'd set up the studio at home is actually full of some stuff because we're doing a master bathroom renovation, which is almost done, but the area where I record is occupied at the moment. So, which is not in the bathroom, by the way, if you want to make those jokes. No, it's a different area of my house. So we're in Amy's setup. We actually set up an office for her, which is kind of a cool. So you see the background, the wallpaper, and all that. That is lots of gold in this office where I am currently. So that's why the background's a little bit different. Her room looks a lot better than what my studio room looks like. But anyways, so let's get back to Kolbe. And so it's kind of interesting. Here's my history with Kolbe. I first took the Kolbe in 2020, so February 2020. And my score was 5.366, and that always bothered me. It really bothered me. I didn't feel like it was a 5.366. I wanted to be something different. It wasn't that, because it seemed like everyone else had these scores where they're really on one end or on the other end, and it really bothered me. I actually didn't feel like it fit me. Okay, so that's what the first test I took. I took another one in March of 2023. All right, so the timing kind of matters in my opinion. This was February of 2020 was right before COVID started, but we knew COVID was coming. All right, this is something I remember talking to Sandy Van at the Zapathon out in Scottsdale. She knew about it in like December of that year, and so we knew it was coming. So, and the reason why I bring that up is because the consultant, Christine, I'll just call her Christine from now on. Christine was great. But she talked about how sometimes when you're in a transition, sometimes it can throw the scores off. That doesn't mean I was in a transition. It doesn't mean I wasn't. March of 2023, that was also significant because we were having some changes in the firm. Okay, so in March of 2023, my score was 3.485. Okay, what was interesting is she told us that usually only 10% or less of people that take the test, the test is wrong. Okay, usually the test is spot on. And even when it's wrong, she says, there's only a variation of 1. It's very rare to have it changed by 2. So remember, my score was 5.366, and then it changed to 3.485. So the 5 changed to a 3, the 4 changed to so the 5 changed to 3, the 3 changed to a 4. And I'm not going to get into what all the different categories mean. By the way, I'm just not going to. They do mean different things. I guess I can get into that in another episode because there is going to be probably a follow up to this. But so the 5 changed to a 3, 3 changed to a 4, the 6 changed to an 8, and then the 6 changed to a 5. Okay, so you can see in there When the 5 changes to a 3, that's a variation of 2. And then when the 6 changed to an 8, that's a variation of 2. All right, which is outside the norm. So I actually have a follow-up meeting with her this following week where, because she's very interested in this, and we're going to have a more detailed one-on-one conversation, which is kind of a cool thing. And I'll be able to report back on that because I think this would be important. But like I said before, the score always bothered me because it didn't feel right to me. And so I was like, okay, does this mean I changed? What does it mean that the score changed? Or is the second score more accurate and a more accurate reflection of who I am? Really, really bothered me. Okay. That's one of those things where it's always been on my mind since 2023. So, almost 3 years, it's been on my mind. And it's really, when she started to get into what Kolbe measures. Okay. This is why I'm not going to go into each individual category because I think this next lesson is more important. Okay. This next lesson is maybe the most important thing. So Kolbe doesn't measure personality. It's not a personality test. I think we call it a personality test a lot of times. It's not. I wouldn't even call it an assessment because you're not testing intelligence. You're not testing skill. You're not measuring experience, things like that. What Kolbe measures is how you instinctively take action whenever you're faced with an issue. Okay. So it's about instincts, which is really more deeply rooted. And that's why I'd asked her a question during this. Is this something that it changes over time? Because the reason I was asking that is like, I wanted to figure out if it made sense for us to have our kids test it. Because I said, can you actually test this on kids? And she said, absolutely. The Kolbe all started where they were doing testing on kids. This all started with whenever they were measuring instincts and all that in children, and I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. So, if you've ever had that question, then yes, you absolutely can. And it's funny because I've always thought of assessments or tests, things like this, where again, I don't think it's an assessment, but I don't know a better word for it at this point. I always viewed them as like snapshots, but it's not really a snapshot. What it really is, and this is something it was a realization of mine, is that Kolbe is more of like an energy map. And I'll explain this more. Trust me, I'll explain this more in a little bit, but think of Kolbe as an energy map. Okay. That, and I'll explain that, like I said, I'll explain this in a little bit, but it's funny because in the association, when we have these conversations, formerly the guild, we always have these situations come up where the owner or the managers are running into some sort of an issue with a person. Okay. And sometimes they think it's effort. Sometimes it could be personality issues, so many different things. Right. And the reality of it is it has to do with alignment. Okay, it has to do with alignment. It doesn't have to do with doesn't usually have to do with effort. It doesn't usually deal with skill level. It really has to do with the alignment in where are they putting their energy, and what are your expectations of where they're putting their energy and at what times and all that. It really has to do with that. And so, I mean, that distinction really matters. And that's part of the reason why it explains why my score felt a little bit wrong. My first score, it felt a little bit wrong. But after having this training, I think that my realization is that my score was actually correct, I think, at first. And I'll explain why in a little bit. But because Christine she was not convinced that my instincts had changed. Okay. She just wasn't. She's very curious. That's why she wanted to have this meeting. I'm basically getting a free consulting out of this, which is kind of cool. But what she said was some profiles, they're naturally adaptable. So when you see that the scores are somewhat in the middle, 5, 3, 6, 6, that's pretty. The only one where I had a strong one was the 3. Okay. That's so they break them into threes basically. So, and So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? That's how they usually break them down. And so I found that really interesting because I'm in the 5, 3, 6, 6. And what she meant was is that the people that have those middle scores, they can typically move up and down the scale. Okay, so their instincts don't move, but they're more adaptable. So the adaptability is the instinct. And I'm sure she would probably put this way better than I'm putting it, but this is my interpretation of it. But the adaptability of the people like my first score is the instinct. And it allowed me to shift my dissatisfaction with that initial score into saying, you know what, that's actually a superpower. It was like this thing that clicked. And so I think that I could probably take that test today, and it might, even if it was a different number, I would or actually, if it was a different number, I would still think that that was probably the right number. And the reason why is because it depends on where I am right now when it comes to my energy levels and what the situation is, and I adapt to it. So whenever I saw that 3, 4, 8, 5, that was me adapting in that situation. And so to me, it naturally fit. It's because I can move up and down that scale. I found that really, really interesting. It also made it easier for me to digest the 5, 3, 6, 6 number. And I don't know why I didn't like the 5, 3, 6, 6 so much, but I didn't like it. I just didn't like it. I wanted to be on one end or the other, and I just wasn't. And so that context does matter. It really does matter. So if you are similar to me, don't let that number bother you, because it can actually mean that you actually have, it's a big strength for you. But so let me get back to the energy and the energy placement and what I meant by all that too. And these instincts are about energy, and they're not really about preference or skill level, all that kind of stuff. Because like preference is like what you like. Okay. Like that's different. Instinct is like where your energy naturally goes whenever you're under the gun, you're under pressure. And so that really does explain a lot. When you understand that fundamental basis of Kolbe, it explains a ton, because it explains why certain tasks feel heavier than they should for you or for your people. It helps you understand why some people thrive whenever there's ambiguity. It helps you understand why some people thrive whenever they have very, very specific instructions. It shows you why some people struggle when they don't have very specific instructions. It explains why some people will burn out in certain roles that look perfect for them on paper. Like we did this thing where we went around, and it was at the end, and she said, you know, tell everyone in the group something you learned about yourself so that they can better work with you. And I can tell you, I don't ever voice this frustration. Okay. But this is me. My team might actually hear this. So, maybe they'll disagree with me because I don't normally show it. But sometimes if I'm talking to someone and they're over explaining something, in my brain, I'm like, I got it. Like, okay, let's move on. I'm done. I don't need any more information. So I told them, I said, I just need bullet points. Give me bullet points. Don't overtell me something. Just give me the basics. I got it. And I've got this ability where I can just give me the bullet points, and I can fill in all the details. And it was really funny because Carrie, who's been with us for a while, she's fantastic. She said, you know what? The moment when we were talking about scores, she's like, I started to understand Tyson more, because I understood whenever I first started, he would give me instructions, and they were very, very simplified instructions. And she's like, I need more detail. I need more detail. And if I had her score when she first started, I would have known, oh, I need to give Carrie more detail. She needs to have like a book to read on things. She's not a bullet point person. I'm a bullet point person. She needs all the detail to fill in all the context gaps. And so it's really interesting that when you know that, it really is. So I think it's going to help you with like engaging with your employees, with your team members, help you understand them, and help you reassign some of the roles. Because people I don't think that they really resist change. I heard this quote once, like people resist change. They resist, or they don't resist change. They resist being changed, something like that. And I think that that's right. People are okay with changing. It's just how you do it, right? It's how you address it. And you see the same thing with tools, like changing with different softwares and all that. Different, you name the vendor, right? It's how you adapt to that change in the firm and how you address it, which is why we created Becca's List, by the way, so you can find the best vendors. Just a little shameless plug, but go to beccaslist.co. But whenever you are looking, let's say you are looking for a new vendor and you're trying to get the team to adopt that, how you approach it with some team members versus another team member is very different. It's very different. There is no longer this, or there never was really. There's not this cookie cutter way of doing it, even though, and this is where I'm going to get into some of my frustrations near the end with this, because I had some realizations. So that's where the bitter pill, there's a bitter pill to swallow for me potentially. But the training made me a little uneasy. And it's not because it challenged me, not because it challenged people. It's really because it challenged policies, and this is where I'm getting a little bit of my bitter pill frustration. Because we do have uniform rules, and the problem with uniform rules is they really do they assume uniform instincts, which is not true at all, right? People don't operate uniformly. People don't have the same instinct scores, if that's the way you want to think about Kolbe. That was a really tough realization. You have this leadership tension between consistency versus effectiveness and fairness versus fit. It has me really rethinking some things. I'll give you an example. So this kind of came up during the training where we have office hours, and some people don't like office hours in the firm. Most people do, by the way. But the way some people are wired instinctually, they don't want it. They don't want office hours, but other people do. And that's where it's there is a lot of friction there, because I've got something that I think really works when it comes to office hours. But if I let the person, let's say there's one person, because there was really one major person was vocal, but we had a couple people that are not huge fans of office hours. And that's because I understand their energy a little bit more when it comes to their instincts. But if I let them go outside the rules, and if they violate the rules with it, so we essentially wouldn't be violating the rules anymore, because we would change them. But the people that need the office hours, if they're sticking to the rules, then it's going to interrupt their work, okay, for the sake of these other people. So that's kind of this give and take and this tension, and I'm not really sure how we're going to deal with that yet. Nothing's going to change until we've really fully thought it through. But what I can't do is sacrifice what we're currently doing and sacrifice, the work of other people just because a couple people want some changes. I can't really do that. But we're going to do our best to align the roles and strengths as much as possible, because it's going to improve productivity. It's going to improve happiness. People are going to really like it. It's going to improve retention, lots of things. There's lots of benefits to it. So we'll do what's best for our team, and that'll be really, really, it's going to be good for them, going to be good for us. But because I think we've all seen that role that looks just perfect on paper. It looks fantastic. But unfortunately, it's draining that person slowly over time. And then eventually it becomes no longer a good fit for them. So what is great about Kolbe, and I'm glad that I have a better understanding of it now, is that now that we have a better understanding, we can understand the instinctive energy, and we understand that uniformity, it feels less important now than designing things for effectiveness. And I think that's something I'm really excited to see how people react to this in the association. Because what's kind of cool about the association is you have these people that go and, we'll talk about things, maybe in a mastermind. It could be in, just at the conference, Max Law Con, we're, talking out in the halls, and, they'll go out and adopt these things. It's a really good testing ground, which I think is really, really cool, where I can see what other people are doing. They can see what I'm doing, and we can all kind of work together that rising tides approach. I think that's kind of a cool thing. So this is one of those topics, like, because I hear people talk about DISC and other things. I think it's one of those topics that's really, really cool. I think because we do Enneagram too, which I think there's some value in that as well. So I think each of these tests, they have value for them. I mean, I don't know all the tests, but I know a lot of them. I think they all have value. They just have they're different tools for different things. And so I wouldn't say Kolbe is better than DISC, is better than Enneagram. I think they're just different tests, different assessments, different thing. They measure different things. So what we have to know, though, is we've got to design, and we'll probably do some of these I'll probably test out DISC too, just to see what that information gives us. Because I know that Brian Mitten is someone that is, a big believer in DISC. But what we have to know is we have to design these rules around the strengths instead of control. A big mistake that I see, and I've seen this since the beginning, ever since I heard about the attorney that made their, not to call them out, I'm not going to mention their name, but they made their employees put their phones in their lockers at the beginning of the day, and they couldn't get them out unless it was on a break or lunch or at the end of the day. That's control. That's what that is. It's still crazy to me, but you have to design these rules around strengths and not control. So think about, ask some questions, where do people stall for no obvious reason? Where do they move fast without really being asked to do things? Which roles exist to make management easier and which ones, are not really working, right? So I think that's kind of an interesting thing. Especially when it comes to management, what exists to make things easier, management easier, and what things are made compared to not making it better, right? So you're making management easier is one thing, but making management better is different. And there's a big distinction there. So maybe ask these questions as to what rules do you have in place that just makes management easier, okay, but doesn't make it better. Okay. So, I think once we kind of get this dialed in a little bit better, it's going to make effort not be as, hard. I guess, I don't know a better way of putting it. I think we're going to see probably increased output, which I think is interesting. You're going to see a decrease in friction. Now, when I talk about that friction, I do talk about you need to naturally increase some friction, and that's from a world without email. There is some friction you need when it comes to communication, but whenever friction in the role itself and the tasks themselves, that's a little bit different. So, because what we're ultimately trying to do is we're trying to increase the culture. Culture is really, really important. So we want to improve the culture, not increase the culture. We want to improve culture. I think that we should always be focused on that. And part of that is decreasing the friction in those tasks. It's really important. So, and it's not really about controlling chaos or anything like that. It's really about creating some intentional flexibility in the rules. I think that's an important part of this too. Instead of having these rigid rules, having some intentional flexibility could be pretty important. But yeah, so I think that this is really, really important. I think that law firms are generally built on rules and precision. That's a big part of some of the things that law firms are built on. There really are lots of rules, right? We have rules that we're guided by. We have rules of evidence. We've got statutes, things like that. We create all these rules and policies and procedures in our firms. And so it makes over standardization really tempting. It really does. But what really matters the most, if you think about it, it's judgment and initiative. Really, judgment and initiative. So if you can kind of figure that part out, that matters most. And you combine that with, how do certain people instinctually react to certain situations. I think what you're going to see is just a lot less burnout in your firms. And you're going to see a lot less exhaustion in you and in your team. And you're going to see a lot more alignment in your goals. But I don't want to overstate this, because I think that this is sometimes what happens, and it doesn't matter what it is. You name the tool, right? If you could go on Becca's list and it could say, this is the best software for this, right? this is the silver bullet. That's not true. Kolbe's not a silver bullet either. Like I said, it's one assessment of many that does one thing. So don't think that you're gonna bring on Kolbe and Kolbe's gonna solve all of the firm's problems. That is not what I'm saying at all. I think you should take the information that you get from it, use it the way it's supposed to be used, and that's it. Okay, it's not a magic elixir. Okay, so don't think of it that way. It's going to Instead, it's going to be a tool that you use. It's going to allow you to stop blaming people for doing things incorrectly or, thinking it's one thing when it's actually another thing. It's going to give you additional information to see, okay, maybe their energy is better placed over here and not over there. Or maybe this person, it's simply an instruction issue where we're not giving them enough detail in this role because they're more of a fact finder. They need to know more about this particular project, and we need to give them more instructions. What was interesting about the last number is implementer. I don't want to get off too far off track, but something I learned was implementer is not what I thought it was. Implement is not like you take something and you implement it into the whatever, right? So what I always thought it was is that we have this new system that we create, and the implementer is really good about implementing that into the system, into the firm, right? That's not at all what it is. It is actually the implementor. So it's not implementer. Christine pointed that out. It's an implementor, OR. It's that person's ability to, and I don't know how this makes any sense with the name, but whatever. It's that person's ability to actually interact in the real world. So the tactile world, be able to like touch and move things and all that. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. So I'm a 6 on that, 5, 3, 6, 6. But I can also, that's one of those ones I think I can move up and down that scale. And I'd asked her about, well, does that mean like, building software and all that? And she said, maybe a little bit, but not really. They're really talking about what's happening in the real world, things you can see, touch, taste, all that kind of stuff, which I thought was really interesting. Really interesting distinction. So I think this is something that I may talk about at Max Law Con this year. I don't know. It's part of this conversation I'm going to have with her this week. We'll see. Because part of this I may just have conversations with people in the hall out of Max Law Con. That may just be what I do, or it's something that may come up during masterminds and all that. I think it's a really cool topic. I'm very curious to see how other people are using it because I know there's a lot of value in it. We've been using Kolbe for a while. And I know that Amy and Kristen in our firm, they use it they think about it way more than I do, but this is just sort of a wake up call for me. I'm glad we did the training because it's a wake up call for me to use it more. And so I'm meeting with Christine again this week. I'm very curious. It's not like I need the answers. I'm very curious. She's very curious, which makes me excited. So we're both very curious about, what we're going to learn. I think important lesson from all this, though, you don't need to redesign everything overnight. I don't plan on redesigning everything overnight. I'm thinking about everything, but the big thing is identifying these energy patterns. Because once you do it, you're not gonna be able to unsee them. I promise you. Because we have in Click, Zoho Click, which is where we chat with each other's numbers, and you're like, oh, that makes complete sense when you look at it more. And so I'll make sure I pay more attention to that because we've had those in there for a while, but really interesting. I think it's interesting stuff. But identify those energy patterns. I think it's going to, take you a really long way. I really do. I think it's really, really important. But just remember, maybe the goal isn't to make everyone work the same way. Maybe it's just to let people work the way they're wired. Okay. So I'm going to say that part again because I think it's really important. I don't want to get lost. When you're dealing with your team, maybe the goal isn't to make everyone work the same way. Maybe it's to let people work the way they're wired. Okay. That makes it more difficult for us to manage. However, it's probably going to make us more effective as a team. Okay. Really, really important. So, all right. just I'm not getting paid to do this. This isn't a plug for Kolbe, or this is a plug for Kolbe, but I'm not getting paid for this. So, but I just want to say I can't recommend Kolbe enough. It's Kolbe. In case you don't know, that'll also be in the show notes. But I don't have a referral link or anything like that. If I can get one before this goes live, then maybe I'll put one in there. But I don't have a referral link. I don't even know if they have a referral link, so don't worry about that. But I just want to make sure that I pass this on because I think it was a really great training. And if you have questions about the training itself, we did have to pay them to do it. They have different levels of trainings that you can do. They do it via Zoom. If you have more questions about that, feel free to shoot me a text. Text line is in the show notes. So 630-9538, 314-630-9538, but it's also in the show notes. So, all right. Have a great week, everybody, and we'll be talking to you.